Cool. So I want to give a little lunch and learn, quick and easy and dirty. So over the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I guess now, I've been building a React Native app that serves a purpose for me. It's a very simple, small app that actually solves a problem that I kind of had. So I decided to build it with Microstates because I wanted to see what it would take to build something with Microstates. And also, I really didn't want to use Redux or any other state management solution because the developer experience isn't as nice. So I guess I'm going to start off with what exactly does this app do? I want to make sure that it's said and it's nice and easy to understand. So when I talk about code examples and what I'm doing with stuff, it's clear. So this is basically just a medication tracker. Maybe it evolves into something more advanced in the future, but right now it just tracks medication dosages and then it reminds you when the dosage is up. So if any of you don't know, I have an autoimmune disease called Behçet's, which is kind of like 4 other autoimmune diseases rolled together. It's like multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and Crohn's kind of all thrown together. And depending on what kind of flare you can have symptoms from any of those. So I take a lot of Advil, and I just want to make sure that I don't take too much Advil. And that's basically what this, and other prescriptions that I might have in the future. So this just makes sure I don't take too much, basically. So I want to give a really quick demo of this application. So here it is. It's really simple. You can see that I've taken some Advil, and just in the line items here, I have like when I took it. So the last dosage I took was at 10:29 a.m. Yesterday, and it was supposed to expire at 4:29. And if I tap it, it'll give me information about it, like when it expired, how much it was, when it was taken, and when it's supposed to expire. I can tap the plus at the top to add a new dosage. I can add the milligrams, how long it's supposed to take, and then I can pick from this date picker what time it was supposed to be taken at. So you can backdate it if you need to, because I've definitely forgot about that. So it has small little things, like I have push notifications for when a dosage is about to expire. It'll push something to your phone about 10 minutes before it's supposed to expire. So it just kind of gives you a nice little heads up. And then also the other cool thing that I really wanted to implement that PWAs can't is these home screen quick actions. So I can just tap add dosage from the home screen, and it'll take me to that route, which is really nice. So those are kind of the reasons why I wanted to do it as a React Native app. And I like dealing with React Native. It's kind of a cool technology. I've kind of played around with it for like 2 years now. So what are microstates? I think we all kind of know about them because we've talked about it a bunch, but the way I kind of characterize it is a immutable state container that are strongly typed. So you don't have to write any custom specific actions if you're just dealing with types like a number or a Boolean. It's really easy to deal with those things. So how is this app structured? Because in React land, you can have your own structure. You can do anything you want. So I figured it'd be a good idea to kind of cover how I structured this app. So I have an app directory, and right now I only have this built for iOS, but theoretically, the way this is structured, I could easily build an Android app out of this because it's all just JavaScript right now. There's nothing native that's going on specific. So I have my app directory, which then has my models, which are microstate models, and my router, which holds all of the routes that can possibly route it to, what component that maps to. And then a little utility function, which helps calling route transitions outside of when you have access to like this context, for example, and it's not passed to you as a prop. And then my screens folder is where all of the views are. So these are the things that the routes render, these are the screens. And index is just the root of the whole thing. That's where the app kind of gets initialized. So yeah, models hold the microstates types. I have two in there. One is the app microstate type, and the other one is which holds the entire app state. And then I have a medication model, which is holds all the information about a medication, like the dosage, when it was taken, and a lot of other little computed properties that I have on there, basically, that are just getters, which helps with date formatting and displaying things and nice little things like that. And if anybody has questions, feel free to speak up. More than willing to stop and answer a question. So yeah, the router contains router-specific concerns, screens or views which the routes are rendered. They're just components, as you know, in React land, everything's kind of a component. And the index is where the app is initialized. It's the first thing that's loaded. It's where we set the initial app state. It's where I do some of the setting up of like those home screen quick actions and push notifications initialization, and even syncing with iCloud, which I haven't quite worked out yet, but it's at least saving things to the key store value there. So the big question I had when I set out to do this was, how does this work with microstates? I haven't built anything with microstates yet before this, and I was really curious how to go about it. Would I use a Redux style connect component to connect all the components that I need data? Or would I use the new React Context API with the provider? And that's kind of the way I went. So I'm using the React state component that is, or provider that Taras wrote for microstates. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. But I have two different ways I use microstates in my app. One is global app state. So it's just the entire app state. And the other is localized state to a view. And that is when you're creating, say, a new dosage in this app. I don't want to commit that to the global app state, but I also want to have microstates track the state of the changes and do all that stuff for me. So I have a microstate inside of that view. So let's go over what an entire app state looks like. So I use the microstate state provider at the root and pass that model down to all of the routes. So when a route renders, it's able to pick the model off of the props. So this is what that state provider looks like. I have my type is the app model. The value is the initial model state. So when the app loads, I snag some things from the async storage, which is React Native's equivalent of local storage. You can think about it. It's just a simple key value store. And then I have an on-change handler that will set anytime the model changes, the app model, it'll set that value back into async storage. So async storage is always up to date. And when that renders, I have the model here, and it's going to render the route navigator. I'm using React navigation for my router. I highly, highly, highly recommend it if you're doing React Native development to use that router. It's most definitely the best one. I use it on a side project that I consulted on. And I refactored them from using Navigator iOS over to React Navigation so they could support Android. And this, I think, by far is like the best router. I would even go as far as say this router is really nice. I would use it on the web too. They have a web the ability to use it on the web. I don't know how well it works, but I think it's better than React router. So take that for what it's worth. You can see with the route navigator, I have a prop called screen props, which is passed down to each screen that's rendered, and I just give it the model. So every screen can have access to the app's model. So yeah, the screen picks off the model from the props and renders the state from the model. The state object is immutable, which is really nice from microstates. And the model is just your microstate model that you can perform transitions and do things with. So an example of that looks like this. This is in my home screen. So I just pick the model off of the props from screen props, and then I render those things. I make sure that the active dosages are there because you can have active and expired dosages. And then I just render those down. And model.state, like I said, is immutable. The other example I have is localized states. And this one, I really like this pattern. I'm not sure if anybody else uses it like this, but I'm mainly using this for creating a new dosage. It could be thought of like a form object, I guess. I created some of those back in the Rails days. But basically, it's just I'm having this microstate model that manages and contains all of my form state. So I use it just to create those newly created dosages locally, and before I want to commit it to the entire app state. I don't want each keystroke to enter the app state because that seems pretty expensive and overkill. And what happens when I cancel the view and I don't even actually hit submit? Then I have to go back and undo all of those changes, which, just isn't fun and doesn't seem like a good way to clean it up. So this is what my form model looks like. I have a microstate type called medication. It's a medication model. And I just have my form model extend that medication. I have a Boolean that sits on this model that is show picker. And it's just, when I showed the demo there, it's that date picker. When you tap the button, it opens up that view they can pick the date from. So that's just a simple toggle, thanks to Microstates. I don't have to do anything crazy there. And then I have two little helpers here that just check if the form is valid, like don't submit if all the fields aren't filled out. And also don't enter a date that, or an hour that isn't a number, right? So like if I go back to that app here and then create a dosage, so if I type in like H, it's not going to be a valid hour. If I type in 25, you can't have 25 hours in a day, so it's not going to be valid. So that's just a neat little validation that I was able to do. And these are just getters on the model. And there's nothing crazy special about these things. So that begs the question of, when I do have this form model and I'm done with it, how do I actually change the app state? What happens to it? How do I get that to be committed to the entire application? Like when I hit submit and I go to and transition to the next view, how do I make sure that actually shows up in the view? So there's no reducers and there's no actions. It's just pushing it onto the app model. So here's the code example. This is my submit method, right? I get the app model from props. I do some date stuff. I could probably do some nicer things with creating that new dosage object. But I create that, which is just a POJO from the form model state. And then I just push it onto the app model. And I do a little bit of stuff here with push notifications, so I can schedule a local notification for you to get that push when you are about to expire. And if you see that user info object there, I'm just taking the new dosage object that I created and passing it there. So whenever this push notification happens and a user taps it, it'll actually take you into the app and to that specific show of that that dosage, and it's just a POJO, which is nice. And since this stuff is synchronous, I can just, right after that's pushed, I can navigate to the home route. So what happens when you need to delete a dosage? Thankfully, it's nice and easy, right? I take the current dosage, I take the model, I filter it down, and I just push the filtered array onto the entire app state, and then I navigate to home. So that's great. That's all awesome. But when I quit the app, all of the stuff is lost. So what about persisting that state to something that will live longer than in memory? If you remember back to the state provider that I had, I have an onChange method here that's just handle model state change, or handle model change. And when that happens, it's just gonna, when a change happens, it's gonna persist that into async storage. For this app, it's really simple. I only am changing on the dosages model on the app model, so I'm the subtype of the microstate model. So I don't have to worry about doing any kind of diffing and figuring out what I actually need to save and what changed. I'm not sure if in the future microstates this onChange. When I first was looking at it, I kind of wanted to serialize the entire app state model into it, but it only hands you what changed, which makes sense. But I can imagine that there's going to be logic here if I wanted to go forward. If I have, say, another thing in there that's dosages and, say, settings, if you want to configure things. I'll have to figure out how to set those in the right keys and stuff. Although it shouldn't be too difficult, but it's just one of those things that I was thinking about.
Can you show how you're actually doing I'm just curious what you're doing to model dosages. Oh, yes. I see. Oh, yeah, you can just call value off on the microstate, and they'll give you the serializable version of the microstate.
I don't have access to that, though. I don't have access to the microstate. I only have access to what's passed from the onChange.
Oh, I think maybe the version that you're using, yeah. So yeah. So I don't know. I think we might be we're not sending a microstate, right? So, but that should be that. I think that model is actually the entire. Then I think in this version, this is the serializable version of the microstate.
Okay, gotcha.
You can just serialize that model, but I think the new version, or I had a version that I was working on that I didn't finish, which was to emit the actual. I mean, I don't know. I think if this is enough, then we can use this. If not, then we can create a microstate and give you microstates. But I guess this should be enough, I think.
Yeah, so this works for my use case. And I think that's my next slide. Yeah, it works really well for me right now because there's no external API to sync with. If I had an external API to post to, all of this would get infinitely more complex. Because I'm not quite sure how to handle those kind of side effects with microstates yet. But that doesn't mean that it can't be figured out and it's not possible. It's very possible. I just don't know the path forward yet. So that's kind of my experience with it. And quick and dirty and a simple app. And hopefully there was some kind of insight that was provided there. Does anybody have questions?
I do. So you had shown like, hey, here's how to like persist that to something. Did you deal with any loading states?
No loading states.
Because that's a problem that I've found very difficult to deal with using like observable patterns. I'm wondering how that would work in this pattern.
Although I lied, there's one. That's probably too large. Okay, that's better. There's one loading state, and it's at the root, and it's really just like, hey, async storage, go fetch your thing. If it's not done, show this loading state. But when that's done, it's gonna show the microstate, right? It's gonna have the initial state loaded and everything.
Yeah, I can see how in this particular app, yeah, you don't really have a need for a lot of like pausing to wait for the async action to finish. Like you can just keep it, like it'll eventually catch up. But
exactly.
And yeah, like in Folio, like there are things we want to like wait and make sure that's done. And yeah, I'm looking forward to see how that'll work out with microstates.
Is Charles there?
He's not in Austin, no.
Oh, sorry. He's not there. No, he's not on the call either, right?
No,
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. So I think can I tell you what my thoughts are about how that would work?
Oh yeah, I want to hear.
Yeah, because ideally what would happen is that, and we don't know exactly what this would look like, but you should be able to opt in to having a loading state on something that's already there. So like one way to think about it would be like, maybe, I don't know exactly what the mechanics for this would be, but I'm imagining something like a, so there is the new version of microstates that Charles has been working on that has the ID container, which is the mechanism that's used to have stability for the microstate, so that if there are pieces of the microstate that have not changed, those return the same objects. But I'm guessing that, and then one of the things that has, it has a kind of there's going to be a middleware mechanism. So I'm guessing that something is going to happen where you can opt into handle asynchrony, and then when you do that, you automatically get some additional state in that node that gives you that state.
Okay.
Like,
And
just
I did
loading
this
that.
with,
That sounds like it'd be pretty elegant.
yeah, the problem is that it's not clear how that would work with serializing, deserializing. So I have that in the previous, in one of my middleware experimentations, but it just, the implementation that I had, it wasn't really obvious how to restore the application into a loading state, for example.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's something we're going to figure out. I mean, there's going to be something. I just don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet.
Cool.
But that's something that, I mean, the cool thing is that we actually have, like, this is the first demo that anyone has ever done of an actual application that's using microstates. That's pretty epic.
I was very excited to get going with it.
Yeah, it's great, and I think what we can, and so from here, like, there's actually, like, we get to really improvise with what we want the outcome to be, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I decided to totally side skirt all the complexity of an API. The closest I get to that is, if you see up here, when I do handle the model change, I set it in async storage, and I also set it in iCloud storage. That's about as close as I'm getting to an API. So if somebody, for example, if I built an iPad app or a Mac OS app, and I had the dosages on my phone, and then I loaded it up on my iPad, all of the dosages should sync over because it's stored in the iCloud storage, key value store that they have.
That's impressively easy.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's an awesome way to do that.
So it doesn't scale very well. Like if you're doing anything more complex, right? But for this use case, it's actually pretty sweet.
Yeah. So there's going to be, so we have a lot of things to figure out, right? Like how, I mean, there's so many things we can do even with this, with like synchronizing. Like imagine we had under the hood a mechanism to manage merging of different state across multiple devices. So like the iCloud storage could have some kind of so if you modified a branch of the tree and another device modified a branch of a tree, those things would get merged together. Like that'd be pretty, like there's really interesting things that we can do on top, like with the API being abstracted, there's things that we can do under the hood to manage complexity automatically. If we have something like, so imagine like we have an iCloud controller or iCloud adapter that you add to a controller, and then once you have it in there, it will automatically resolve multiple devices trying to write to the same iCloud storage, something like that.
Collaborative document editing like Google Docs would be an amazing demo for Microstates.
Wow, yeah, that would blow people away.
Who wants to build it?
That's what this is, right? This is what we're up to now, right? Like collectively, this is basically what we're up to. This is what our opportunity is, because the API, the external API of Microstates hasn't changed in almost a year. That's pretty stable. And the internals we can rewrite very quickly. What we don't know yet is how all this stuff should fit together. So we got a lot of experimentation to do.
Gotcha. So one last thing I wanted to actually show while I'm in the code here. This is how push notifications are handled inside of React Native. You have this on notification function handler where it gives you a notification object that gives you some things on it, and one of those things is user interaction Boolean. So that just means did somebody tap view and is like trying to actually enter into the app from it? And if they are, I pick off the data that I pushed onto when I created this notification, and I just use a microstate to create. So it creates a microstate out of that from the medication model using the POJO that I passed. And then from there, I just navigate to that show, which is nice and quick and easy. It's so nice to work with microstates on this. Because I don't know how I would, like, in any other world, how I would rehydrate as easy because literally it's just a Pojo, and I just push it along.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a question, but I gotta say I'm really excited. I love this app, and I love the example that you've created of an app with microstates running in it.
Yay! that's cool. That's good to hear because it's definitely from my perspective, it's kind of a dumb app, right? Like it's not, it doesn't do anything special, but damn, is it useful?
Well, it's not trivial, right? It's actually not trivial. You have like every single piece aside from managing asynchrony. You have almost every other case in here, so it's really. I mean, you have probably like 5 or 6 different state patterns in here. So it's definitely covers a pretty good spectrum of challenges that you would encounter. Maybe not all of them, but pretty good collection of them.
So this is the app model, which I just have 2 getters on here that give me the active and expired dosages. There's so many more things I want to do here. Like I want to add another model here that's like settings, which would be a settings microstate type where I could then go into, say, like the medication. Oh, wait, I'm in models. If I go to medication, like down here, I have a getter that just gives me the notification date. And it just subtracts 10 minutes from the date that is supposed to be up. But it'd be really cool if this was configurable. And it can be with a microstate. Oh yeah, I also have an initialize in here that, because we're coming from when it's stringified, it's a string. When it initializes and it notices that time taken, which is supposed to be an object here, a date object, it'll just turn it into a date object and then return it, which is neat. So yeah, this was fun. And Thros++ on that README, I was in that README for like 5 straight days digging things out of it, and it was really helpful.
It's awesome.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't think that Bitbot works with voice command.
We need to build it.
David, remember when we were talking we were talking in the podcast, and I was saying where you start to type and you just kind of like doing things already, where you're like just typing away, you just add this thing, you just keep going, you just keep doing there's kind of like a momentum you get from working with microstates. And I don't know if you noticed, but when Rob was doing that, he was actually already like 30% finished with what he wanted to do just by typing in like put settings here and then add this type, and you're already doing that. Like you're already implementing that feature just while talking with us on the like through this presentation. Yep,
Exactly.
I think it'll be really cool demos, like when we actually start to, like, if you're like, okay, let's build this thing with microstates and just kind of walk people through it. Like I think it'd be really impressive, like the momentum that you get from just using it. Yeah,
I agree. So if anybody wants to dig around in my possibly bad code, it's open source. I push to it whenever I make changes. And I do intend on getting this into the App Store. So bearing if Apple thinks this is good enough to be in their App Store, we'll see. But
okay, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What kind of things, like, what was there any, like, how do you find microstates mapped on what you already knew? Like, did you find that there were different ways you need to think about things, or did it match what you were doing, what you were expecting before? Like, how did that, what was that mental process like?
It was easy for me. And I kind of like scratched the surface about it with my slide here, kind of like, do you need to create a new dosage? Just push it. It's really easy to think about. these things as like pojos, and like I'm just working, like my app model is an object that has a thing on it called dosages, which is an array of other objects. And if I need to modify it, like if I'm adding something, I can just push to it. If I need to remove something specific, I can filter it out. And it's just really easy to think about manipulating your data like that, rather than like, okay, I need to do this. So what I actually need to do is I need to create an action, and then I need to make a reducer that responds to that action that will do the things that I need to do and make sure that it's connected properly. Like I didn't have to worry about any of that stuff. And I don't know, for me, it was a much simpler model. Like everything fell away. I just focused on actually building the app. Like it wasn't about me thinking about the technology at all. It was about me thinking about how can I model this UI to solve the damn problem that I have, which was cool.
Oh, that's very cool. That's very cool. I think it was a really cool presentation. Like after Charles does his presentation, this presentation would be really good, I think, at actually anywhere as a follow-up to what we're doing, you know?
Yeah, I was thinking this eventually will graduate into a meetup talk. I threw these slides together in about 30 minutes while eating lunch. So they're not as nice as I wanted them to be. But I was really excited about just showing this to everybody because I had a lot of fun doing it. And surprisingly, doing some of the things that I thought were really complex, like push notifications, turned out to be about an hour worth of work. And a lot of it was just me redoing how I handled dates. If I had to say what the hardest thing about this whole app was, it was dates. Dates and naming.
Date microstate would actually be really interesting.
Have you heard Charles's idea about dates?
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it briefly, but I think it's one of those things that it's just a matter of time, waiting for somebody like to pick it up, you know?
Yeah. He's got a pretty rad idea about how dates should work. I think it's pretty much on point with microstates. It's very tree-like.
Charles just merged a PR. Oh no, he pushed commits. No, he pushed commits.
All right, cool. Anything else?
No, good job.
Thanks,
That's awesome.
I will. I'll drop a link to the repo in general for you guys. Cool. All right. Take it easy, Al.
Peace.
Bye.